everyone. This is Mary from Koehler and Dram, and I'm here today with Emily, our marketing director. And then also today our special guest is Shannon Foreman. So I am super excited. Shannon, I met through a networking group, and she has just been a really awesome resource and just a really bright light to have kind of just around, and knowing that she's there is just really super awesome. But Shannon does financial planning, and she works with not only businesses, but with women and entrepreneurs as she continues on owning her own business, which I think is so fabulous that she's able to do that for the world and for us as a resource. So a little bit about Shannon. Shannon grew up with creative parents. So don't just check out, guys, just because you think oh, it's business. No, it's great because Shannon understands. She has creative parents. She grew up in a creative house. So she really gets where we're coming from and where the floral industry is kind of at as well. And then when she was 19, she decided that she wanted to create her own internship. So she went into the bank that she was working at and asked the CEO if she could just make her own internship. And he was like, sure, why not? So she was able to not only work with the bank, but she was able to do commercial business banking, consumer and lending, mortgages, and personal finance, which is awesome because she is so well-rounded, not only as a person, but just also in her financial knowledge. She just really knows it all, and she really knows her stuff. And then she kind of just continued on because she loved seeing the impact that she made and how she was able to really help people. And I think that's so important because finances can be super scary and very intimidating. And it's kind of I was listening to a podcast that Shannon was on, and she was saying we don't talk about money, and we should. And, it shouldn't be this scary conversation. And so I'm really excited to have Shannon on today with us because I think it's time that we're not so scared. Don't be so scared about finances. So thank you so much for joining us, Shannon.
Well, can you just follow me around and do that intro? Now I just feel good about myself for the rest of the day. All right, let's start every day like that. I'm grateful to be here with your audience and with both of you to talk and just break down some stuff that kind of probably feels a little bit maybe unapproachable. There might be different emotions that go with finances. And like you said, yes, I have two very creative parents. I have extended family, very creative, lots of musicians, lots of artists, lots of people that work in the theatrical space. So when I went into my career, I was the black sheep of the family. And I'm the black sheep of the industry because I don't function like everybody else either. I'm an out of the box creative brain. So for those of you watching and listening, I'm very much right brained and left brain. So I speak both languages fluently, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so. Well, and you're also just very approachable. I love how you tackle things with mindset. And like you said, the emotional side of it, because sometimes it's not just about doing X and Y and you get Z. Sometimes it's realizing when I do Y, I feel X and then Z happens.
Yes.
So I think that's really awesome. Well, with COVID and everything happening, I know that we've had some businesses that have decided to start. Some people have decided to start up a business and they've created their own studio. I know a lot of people decided to do big career shifts and big changes because of COVID or because of the impact that it had. What are just a few things that as you're starting out a new business, maybe that people should keep in mind or, kind of not neglect to do?
Yeah. So this is a great question. And I will preface it is there is a rising element of entrepreneurs in all different types of spaces. And much of it has occurred, honestly, with the female population because females were most affected by COVID in the workspace. We had hundreds of thousands of women in September of 2020 who exited the workforce because of COVID. A lot of that had to do with childcare and different things like that. But now understanding the flexibility that entrepreneurship might create, twofold. It creates flexibility, but it's also a lot of work. Like it's not just everybody's rainbow and sunshines that they post on Instagram, right? Here's all of the pretty things. Oh, wait, I woke up in the middle of the night in a hot sweat because I couldn't remember that I had to do this or pay this bill or do that, right? All of those things occur for us. And sometimes we don't even talk about them. So a couple of like tactical things that I think are important. And then a couple of other pieces. One, register yourself as a business. Talk to an attorney or an accountant. What is the best way? Most likely probably an LLC, depending on, because that gives you flexibility when it comes to filing your taxes. You can own an LLC and file taxes any type of company's way. I could get more granular about that, but you might cross your eyes. So essentially just like register yourself as a business. It doesn't cost you anything to go, for instance, on the Minnesota Secretary of State website to register yourself as a business. Go out there and do that. Secondly, establish a bank account and figure out how you're going to get paid. Because you can have a business all you want to, but if you don't have a plan around how you're going to get paid and how you're going to get clients and not being afraid to ask for the business, you're not going to make any money. So that business that you started or that LLC that you started is basically worthless. We don't want it to be worthless. We want you to have a plan. We want you to take that plan of action. So separate your personal and your business finances. Don't commingle those assets together. Trust me, I see it far too often when I sit down with entrepreneurs, especially creatives. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, or if you're doing it right now that, oh my goodness, you're failing miserably. No, you're not. You are where you are right now, and we can take the steps to correct those behaviors. But you want to make sure, just from a record keeping standpoint, that you have everything separated. From a record keeping standpoint, I strongly encourage you to get QuickBooks or some sort of like software. I use QuickBooks in my business. It was probably the first subscription I signed up for, besides anything that I had to do from a financial planning perspective, because you can track everything. And if you have those separate bank accounts set up, then when it comes to tax time, which I see this far too frequently, especially on social media, or I talk to friends that I know they're entrepreneurs, like, it's tax time. I got to go collect all my receipts. I got to make sure I have everything. I'm going to be up for hours. I'm going to need more coffee. This is so exhausting. Like, what are you doing to yourself? It does not have to be that hard, my friend. Do you know how long it took me to file my taxes this year? Both my husband and I are entrepreneurs. Took us 20 minutes lining everything up from a paper standpoint that we couldn't put into QuickBooks, 20 minutes on our counter. And then we filed everything and gave it to our CPA, because all of our business expenses are categorized in QuickBooks, and we have one way of having that all linked into our business. So we're not having to go, oh, I went to Target and I bought XYZ for myself at home, lettuce, tomatoes, whatever it is that you're buying for yourself at home. And oh, I saw these great knickknacks that are going to be great for whatever it is that I have to do for work, right? A display, an arrangement, whatever it might be. These are going to be great. I'm going to buy them and I'm going to include them on the same transaction. Now you just messed yourself up when it comes to tax time. You can be a cashier's nightmare. I don't care, but separate those transactions, ring one out as a personal transaction, ring one out as a business transaction, and use your separate account for that piece. I see that way too frequently. And I know it sounds pretty remedial from a financial standpoint, but those are really the things that you want to make sure that you're doing right when you're starting out. So registering yourself, separating your personal and business, and setting up some sort of monitoring, tracking for all of your expenses so that it doesn't become just this horrendous time at tax season. And instead, when everybody else is posting that they have that, you're like, I've figured it out.
Well, I love that. I think that's really important. At Koehler, we don't allow anyone who doesn't have a tax ID to purchase from us, which I think also is really great for our floral community, because it does really push you guys as a business to really have that and to really step up and own it. And I also think that having that QuickBooks is also really great too. A great part of Koehler is that on the back end of our website for each customer, you're able to find all your receipts on there. So if you are in one of those panic modes that Shannon talked about, like you can access that from your side as well, which is super awesome. But also then if you've been really diligent and one day you just miss an invoice or forget, like that's okay, because again, you can access it through our website, which is great. So that's really awesome.
I would just add that you can use the mobile app on QuickBooks. And so when you leave and make your purchase, you can just scan the receipt
I was going to say, I think
and throw it away.
Yeah.
So
That's
you
what I was
don't
gonna
have
say too. It's like, yeah, it's great to have QuickBooks, but I feel like that's something that you should kind of stay on top of, along with, like don't just like accumulate receipts and then you've got this mass of paper, which I'm guilty of. I've been there, I've done it. But then I've got this huge mass of paper on my desk. I'm like, oh my God, I got to go through all of this and figure out what's personal, what's business, what can I scan in, so.
And none
Yeah.
of that sounds fun. I like numbers. I don't like receipts. I don't want to do that. I like people. And especially if you're a creative brain and money gives you that, Mary Catherine and I've talked about mindset multiple times. If you are a creative and you have to do that, what is it going to be on your to-do list? You are literally going to do everything else before you do that.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to do it. And yes, you should always do the things you don't want to do first. That's great. Every personal development person tells you to do that. Nobody does that in action unless you're a very disciplined individual. So when you leave somewhere, scan the receipt and it's done. Because from a tax planning perspective, now I cannot give you tax or legal advice. Let me just preface that, because my compliance team would be like, what are you doing? But you really just need to keep those receipts as images. So if you were to become audited, then you have proof that that was a business expense. You don't need it to file your taxes if you're tracking everything already in QuickBooks, because then QuickBooks will literally show you what your revenue is, what your expenses are, and what your profit is. And at the end of the day, the profit is what matters. I hear too many people rattle off what the revenue is. That's wonderful. But if your expenses are the same as your revenue, guess what, friend? You're not making any money. If your taxes are super low, you're not making any money, which means you can't qualify to build wealth by buying a home or doing other things. So there's a lot that plays into that level of organization as well, beyond just filing your taxes.
Well, no, and I think that's really important too, because it's kind of been talked about, like when you're collecting sales tax, the way that the Minnesota state has you do it is you're collecting the sales tax to the person that it's going to. And if you don't pay attention to that, like things can get hairy really quick, and then you do get audited. And so if you have all of this QuickBooks stuff ready to go, if there is that hard side of it, then at least like there's a little bit of like it's going to be okay, because that you've already been keeping up with your QuickBooks and you've been, doing your receipts every day and going through that. So I think
being audited doesn't have to be a scary thing. Then you're just like, okay, here, yeah, I'll show you everything. I did it the right way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way. I would also just so those are all practical things. Now let's talk about like the mindset part of it, because those two operate in capacity together. So you're just starting out, you're new, you've never done a business before. You need to have people around you, your squad, your team, whatever you want to call it, right? These individuals that are going to support you. You're going to have people like a CPA, an attorney, a banker, a financial planner, whatever it might be. Then you need to have, a therapist, a coach, like who's going to keep you going when you start to doubt yourself and your capabilities, because it will happen. And people who tell you that it won't happen are lying to you, because we're all human and we get to a place and then we have, this overused word of imposter syndrome, but we start to really doubt ourselves and our capabilities. And the reality is we're in the right space that we need to be if we're doubting ourselves, because we're pushing ourselves to new heights of where we can go and what we can do. And just because there's somebody else out there doing the same thing that you are doesn't mean that, you can't do that. I just had this conversation with my team. I was like, well, I don't know if I should go to that event. Maybe it's saturated with financial advisors. And my marketing director comes back and says to me, "Are you kidding me? You are not like any other financial advisor. You are signing up for that event." And I had to check myself, right? We all get into those spaces. So you need to have that practical team that will support you with the logistics of your business. And then you need to have that team that's going to encourage you. Maybe it's a group of really great girlfriends, other people that are in that entrepreneur space, a formal business coach, a life coach, a therapist. I'm a huge fan of therapy. But we need to have that mental stability because we don't have to do it on our own. There's too much of this society that tells us that we have to, if you can do it by yourself and you're independent, you're more successful. Forget that garbage. Don't subscribe to that. Bring everybody along with you and have one big fancy party, but you're not going to be able to just go all in by yourself. And that's part of the reason why I feel like my business has been so successful, is because I've had those people to turn to when I've doubted myself and I haven't been in a space, or something's gone wrong and I'm like, oh, I didn't expect it to go that way. I started my business in January of 2020, and then, March of 2020 happened.
Timing.
Well, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because we've talked about this with other people that we've had on. And, we've talked about like, haven't done a huge wedding before, or haven't been able to do a pergola, or haven't done X or Y, but you're still going to charge for it. Like, you're still going to charge that amount that you would, even if you were like seasoned in doing it. So it's kind of the same thing. Like, you need those people on your side, like cheering you on, saying like, it's okay, keep going, you can do it. So I'm really happy that you brought that up as something that's super important.
Can we talk about pricing for a little bit? This is like, I love talking about pricing.
Yeah, come on in.
So here's the deal. Everybody always thinks like, I've got a price to my competition. I've got a price to what the industry's doing. I've got a price that people are gonna, afford me, whatever it might be, right? There's all these different algorithms of what you need to be able to create your pricing. I have a little bit of a different mantra on that. You need to figure out what you need to live off of as an individual. So when I work with clients, we start with, what is your personal lifestyle? What do you want your life to be like? Then we back into the numbers of what you need to live off. What do you need to pay? Then what do you need to charge in order to pay yourself that net number after taxes, expenses, whatever it might be? Because the most amount of stress that comes from entrepreneurship is the fact that we can't live the lifestyle we want, right? We signed up for flexibility. We signed up for being able to do our own thing. We signed up for not having to, for being our own bosses. That element, if you're not achieving that, you're not doing it right over here. And now that anxiety, that mindset, all of that starts to, mix around in your brain. And you literally are like, well, then I shouldn't charge for that pergola, or I can't do that big wedding because I don't know how to do it. Well, if okay, I'm going to charge this for a wedding because that means XYZ over here. I can go on this vacation. I can send my kids to college. I can buy this house. I can do these things that I have the drive for in my personal relationships. And that's relatable to the other people that you're helping too. And I think that a lot of times we need to remember that as consumers, when we're supporting small businesses, we're not just paying for overhead, we're paying for their mortgage, we're paying for their light bill, we're paying for, to send their kids to daycare, whatever it might be. Those are the elements that I think you need to back into. And I do have a free wealth assessment worksheet on my website that you can download. You can put in all of your expenses, all of your income. It's not necessarily geared towards entrepreneurs. If you have more questions and want to talk about that, I'd be happy to share with you a little bit more information, or you can schedule a wealth assessment. But that tool will start to help you see everything on one page for you personally, that you can translate that into the other side of the business. And if you're like, Shannon, I don't want to figure out how to do any of that, that's where you hire somebody to help you figure it out. And it's okay to do that. It's okay to hire somebody to help you figure that
I think
out.
that's a really good point too, because it's then that doesn't just translate for the new business owners, but also our seasoned people. We have people in the business who've been in the business for 15 years, and maybe they do want that vacation, or maybe they do want, to do
retire,
or, whatever it is. And I think keeping that in mind, as they're pricing out weddings, I know like right now in the floral industry, flower prices are going up. it's the way it is, COVID
Every
happened,
pricing is going up.
everything is going
Everything's
up,
going up.
right? So you might feel bad, like, oh, I feel so bad, like I quoted them this, but now it has to be quoted this way. Like, you got to do it because everyone understands now. Like,
well, I think my husband and I were just having this conversation on a walk this morning. So he's a real estate agent. And he's talking about a client where they're, it's actually a mutual client of ours, buying a house, selling a house. That's a huge transaction right now. How do you set that client up for what could happen, right? So when you're meeting with a bride or someone that you're doing a wedding for, we'll just say, what you can set them up for is, this is why this is this way, right? You can explain it. It's okay to tell people the why behind things. When we explain the why, our clients and consumers will understand that much more. And if we're scared of saying that why are we scared of saying that why? Because we don't believe we're worth that money. We don't believe that we have the talent and the capability to do that. Well, then that goes back to, okay, well, what do you need to be doing in order to be in that space? It's very uncomfortable when you start to raise your prices.
Yeah.
But guess what? It's only uncomfortable once.
Right. And it is kind of that touchy subject, and the industry is what it is. It's transportation, it's availability, it's staffing, even at the farms. Like, it comes down to that really granular level from even our sources for the reasoning behind why prices are going up in our industry. But that is what it is. And honestly, I think transparency is always the best policy, especially with clients when you're running a business, and being able to just explain to them and be upfront with them and be transparent with them is super important. And people get it. I think people are so worried about getting pushback or, an angry bride and groom or an angry mother of the bride or something like that. Like, we don't want to disappoint people, right? Like, we're
those are really hard people to deal with.
People happy. So we don't want to have that tough conversation and potentially disappoint someone. But people do understand, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be mad. And back to Shannon's point too, like, you have to set your pricing based on what you want your lifestyle to be. So are you willing to then, take a hit on the risk that you might disappoint someone? It's more important to focus on your business and focus on you and making a living, because we're in this business to make a living. You're not in this business to lose money, right? So.
Well, and I would also say, okay, so let's say the roses are going to go up, in price, but there might be something else that could be equally as beautiful. Your bride doesn't necessarily know that. And if she does, she spent way too much time on Pinterest and flower blogs, because I don't know jack diddly squat. I would have just gone and been like, okay, these are the colors I like. And my bouquets turned out wonderful. Now, this was, over a decade ago that I got married, so the prices were a lot different. But that being said, use your creative brain in that element for the bride. Give them an option. Say, okay, I know the prices are going to be more expensive. This is what your dream looks like. Here's another alternative I wanted to be able to give you so that you could see something else equally beautiful, but perhaps inside your budget, right?
Yeah.
Those conversations, using your creative brain to twist and turn into that situation. People love options. They might still choose the more expensive one, but they love that they had the option. That also shows that you care, you understand where they are from a budget standpoint, all of those kinds of things. Because I also look at it from, I've helped budget a lot of weddings from an aspect of who's getting married and what's happening and how do you spend everything. And, do you cut down the guest list? What are the areas that you have the ability to be able to cut down those things from? So yeah. I think being able to understand the bigger picture for your guest or client is really important.
I think it's important too for people to keep in mind, like, you're the expert. This is the bride and groom are hopefully only doing this one time, right?
Right.
So your clients are doing this one time. They're not a florist. They're not an event planner. They're not a designer. So you're the expert. They are coming to you for your expertise. So I think, like, maintaining confidence in yourself too can kind of help sell that. And we've talked a lot internally too about even availability when it comes to varieties. Like, try not to sell a specific variety, sell by color, because really what your clients are looking for is an overall look. And maybe they have one or two like favorite flowers or must-have flowers, but maybe your fillers or your greens are negotiable. So maybe there's some wiggle room in your budget there, or maybe it's not hot pink, maybe it's light pink, maybe you just transition, because sometimes, as we know, even colors can be different prices, but you're the expert. So you pitch that client, and like Shannon said, people like options. So maybe they want that super expensive look, but they don't have the budget for it, but you can deliver a very similar look just with, maybe some less expensive flowers, and they're still going to be happy with it because you're the expert. You've delivered what they wanted, and what they wanted was that overall look.
Yeah. And I think when we go back to not only what they want, but also what we want, you have drive and meaning behind what you're doing, and drive and meaning behind what you do helps those numbers become easier to understand when it comes to a pricing standpoint. Like if you can equate, okay, I need to do this much in sales, I have this much in taxes, this much in expenses, this much in payroll, whatever you've got to do, right? That nets me this number. That means I'm able to go on a vacation every year. I'm able to do, I don't know, go out to eat every week. I'm able to get my nails done. I'm able to send my kids to college. I'm able to buy a house. Like all of these aspects of things are now more relatable. You talked a little bit before about the seasoned florist and the seasoned individual in their business. I think that it's really important that we start to talk about, business transitioning. Are you going, like if you have a team, what are you going to do? Do you want to retire at some point? What does that look like? Do you want to just work less? For many entrepreneurs, it's not like a firm 65 retirement date like it would be if you're in corporate America. It is, well, maybe I'd like to do a couple events here and there, but planning to know what your income is going to be, because you're used to this and then it goes away. Also, while you're growing your business, are you still paying into Social Security, taxes, and Medicare so that you have those benefits when retirement comes? Because if you don't, then you have to be saving more for yourself, and you don't want to play catch up. So for those starting out or in mid-career or end career, you want to make sure that you're contributing to some space of retirement. And it doesn't have to just be a tax deductible 401k, right? There are lots of options out there for you as a business owner that you can contribute to as well. But I think that those pieces are really important when we come to the aspect of practical, where you are in your business, and then that mindset, okay, this is what I need to charge so that I can get to this XYZ point of in my life.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that established within here, then that pricing really does end up being doubted, or is like, maybe I'm not worth it. Well, you're worth retiring, aren't you?
Right.
Right. I love
So
that aspect, or that mindset, like you're talking about, for that long-term planning, because it's like I'm a creative brain person, and the numbers thing sort of makes me want to go cross-eyed and pass out sometimes. So so I completely understand sort of that mindset. Of course, like it is intimidating and it is confusing, and like I don't really even get retirement stuff, but that's totally fine. And I think like having people like you as a resource is really valuable, to help people like me get it. But having that sort of long-term vision and having those long-term goals. When do you want to retire? Do you want a house? What kind of car do you want to drive even? Do you have kids that you are thinking that you're going to support through college? Like all of that as an entrepreneur is things that you do need to consider. And I think once you kind of have that long-term goal in mind, it's sort of easier to fill in those pieces a little bit. But running your own business is hard, man.
it is. And there's so many more responsibilities. And that's why there's a fraction of people in our world that do this versus the people that show up for, more traditional corporate or business setting type of job. It is a lot of work and it is a commitment, and you don't have to do it by yourself. So I mentioned that team or squad. So, for you, Emily, like being able to do the numbers thing might not be your jam. So hiring somebody is okay to do. Also, then working with that person to understand, okay, this is how much I'm going to have to pay for this person. So now I'm going to have to upcharge over here to be able to cover that cost. There is nothing wrong with that. You want to know what? Target doesn't think about that. Byerly's doesn't think about that. I bet you Bachman's doesn't think about that.
Right.
All of these other places that are more corporate settings don't think about that. We shouldn't have to either as business owners, doubt ourselves for the full capabilities of what we need to achieve in our lives.
Well, and I think something too that we always kind of forget until it happens is that, wedding seasons, and this isn't just for weddings, but wedding season has like a kind of a start date and an end date. And with COVID, that kind of changed up 2021. But come wintertime, they're not going to be like, there's not going to be tons and tons of weddings. So I think keeping that in mind too, of like having that nest egg, I'm guessing is what you would say. I don't know, but kind of like what should people be thinking about? Because I know January is pretty slow and it's mostly just funerals or just everyday work. So like, what do you kind of think people should be thinking about in terms of like, right now is the summer and everything is happening and all the events are going on, but people are gonna slow down, come November.
Well, and especially this is a great question because it's all about cash flow.
Right.
And I look at it as this aspect of like what goes in and what comes out. You want that to be a positive number, not a negative number, right? We know that it isn't always even. No entrepreneur has an even threshold of income, right? On a monthly basis, you have to plan. So again, going back to your personal living expenses, your personal lifestyle, what do you need to have in savings so that come January, you can still live the same lifestyle? How do you get to that space from a savings perspective? Well, a lot of times there's this number of 3 months of living expenses. I would push for entrepreneurs to have 6 to 9 months of living expenses, especially after everything that happened in COVID time, right? So you look at what are the like things you can't live without, right? Because and can't live without might be different for some people. Like I can't live without therapy. I can't live without my workout membership. I work out at home, but I have a membership that I have classes for at home. Those are things that are not negotiable for me. Going out to eat, that's negotiable for me. I don't necessarily need to do that. So, looking at what are those non-negotiable life expenses every month, and then figuring out what that number would be to get closer to that 6 to 9 months. And the same thing for your business, because if your business isn't producing the same level of income, you still have bills you have to pay and you still have things that you need to do. So what are those business expenses? When you have those two separate, as you said, Mary Catherine, nest eggs or emergency funds or buffers, then that anxiety doesn't happen as much when the cash flow isn't there. Now, some of you might be saying, well, Shannon, I don't even know how to get to that space. I am just making it by. I'm just able to pay my bills. I'm not able to save anything. Do you know what I'm going to say to you, friend? You need to increase your prices. And so if you can't live through the entire 12 months of your business because it is seasonal, then you need to be raising your prices so that you can have that element going forward. So a lot of times what we work with clients on a cash flow perspective is what are your living expenses? What do you need to have for that buffer emergency savings? And then what should you be saving for the long term? Taking those and then backing into what do you need your pricing to be so that you can get to those spaces? Because we know come January, we're not going to have the same flow of income. So we got to have that level of security.
Right.
Don't put it off till January to figure out. That's silly.
Right. Price increases is kind of an interesting topic, I think, for floral in general, just looking at it from like a high level industry perspective too. We were talking about it with our buying team just last week, actually, and we really haven't seen, in terms of even our product, a significant price increase for a long time. So it kind of stands to reason where if you look at, other industries and other product, prices kind of increase, incrementally, but increased kind of steadily over time. Well, we didn't really have that in floral. So at some point, something's got to give. And I think COVID kind of triggered that for the floral industry. So now when we're looking at product availability and freight has gone up and, labor availability has gone down. So then wages have to go up, so all of these factors play into pricing the product, but it makes sense, so over time, our goods and services increase in price. We haven't really seen that with floral. So now we are kind of seeing that. And unfortunately, a lot of our prices are increasing more than what you would normally expect to see in, that short span of time, 12 months or so. But Shannon, to your point too, you have to increase your prices. It's the cost of goods and services, and making a profit means you have to charge a little more, especially when you're paying more for product.
Absolutely. Your bottom line won't be there. And you bring up a great point, Emily, because COVID did have a really big impact to a lot of industries who are dependent on agriculture, and prices did go up. We've also lived in a somewhat from an earnings perspective, the market, money, financial industry for the last probably 11, 12 years, with the exception of March of last year, we've lived in a very upstream kind of rose-colored glasses situation where we haven't had huge inflation. So that means like the cost of things haven't gone up. But if you think about what a bottle of Coca-Cola costs you in 1990 versus what it costs you now, that price has definitely gone up. And so it is okay for you to increase your services just the same to cover those costs as well. And as long as you have a story behind it, again, Emily, you just literally wrote that story for anybody listening. You have that story to be able to tell your clients, and that explanation is there for them.
Well, and even if you look at like the price of a 2x4, right? Like I think I looked
Lumber, right?
They won't even put pricing on lumber anymore in a lot of the stores because it's changing so fast and so quickly. But last I'd heard it was like one 2x4 was like $12.99, which is unheard of because the 2x4 is like the cheapest piece of wood. It's higher now. Okay, great. It's a lot higher now.
Two pieces of plywood. We just did a project at the house.
Okay.
2 pieces of plywood. $120.
Oh,
plywood.
Yeah,
plywood.
not
We were
cherry.
talking about building a deck on our house too, and I was like, "Oh, maybe let's hold off on that. We can't afford that this year."
Yeah. So everything, these, when we look at manufacturing, when we look at agriculture, you have to think about it. They had to shut down like the rest of us. They are behind being able to produce the products that we need. And that is also increasing prices. Honest with you, from a lumber standpoint, when prices go up, they usually come down all that much, because they're still playing that level of catch-up game. And so we have to look at that in the space.
Ooh, I think we're having connectivity issues. Hold on. Oh, this is just a minute.
Okay.
Shannon, are you still with us?
I know that she reviewed her internet before this, so.
Okay, let me. All right, can you see and hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Internet.
We love it. We
Technology.
love it. Hate it.
Both.
Oh no. Okay, we're good.
All of the things. You can keep that in. This is great. This is human. This is life. This is how we roll, friends. Like,
yeah, we're just gonna go with it.
We are. Well, okay, so something I wanted to bring up that is going to be a tough topic, and I'm just going to say it's going to be a tough topic because it's just something that we don't like to talk about, but I do really want to talk about what do you do with what do you do planning wise with your business? Let's say something unfortunate happens to you or to, whoever has the business in your family who's running it and they no longer can work or they've passed away suddenly or something happens. Like, what as a business entrepreneur owner should you have in place for that? Like, I know no one wants to talk about it and it's really hard, and we've all
I love talking about it, but nobody wants
great
to
we've all though experienced this year specifically to like a lot of this realization of like our mortality rate is not necessarily forever. So I do really want to kind of touch upon this because I think it really is important, especially if you really want to take care of your family, even if you're not there.
Yeah. And you don't necessarily have to have immediate family, but what do you want from your business? So let's say you're well seasoned in your business, or you're just starting out. The same applies to you, because really you don't know when you leave the house whether you will return. I don't want to like sound morbid, but for instance, this weekend, my husband found out one of his high school hockey teammates passed away in a tragic car accident on scene. 2 little boys. His wife is in critical condition. It's a horrible story. You don't know that that's going to happen. The same day I found out that a kid a couple years younger than me in high school is diagnosed with brain cancer as a little girl at home. Like, we don't know that these things are going to happen to us. We cannot predict everything, but you can plan for some of those unfortunate circumstances. So looking at it from making sure that you have the right legal documents in place. If you have minor children, this is really important. If you don't have minor children, it's really important. But being able to have, at minimum, a will, a power of attorney, and a healthcare directive. If you are a homeowner, you can put beneficiaries on your house, on your car. They're called transfer on death deeds. You file them with the state or the county. The will, the power of attorney, and the healthcare directive, do not do those on the internet. Hire an attorney to do them, because they're very specific to you and your business. You might also say you're in partnership with someone else. You both own the business together. You might want to establish a buy-sell agreement. You need to fund that buy-sell agreement with life insurance. Otherwise, it's a really expensive, useless piece of paper. So having all of those legal documents don't sound like any fun or sexy. However, if something happens to you, it makes it less messy for your family. Let's say you pass away. You own this business with a partner. That partner is now going into business with your partner, like
Right.
your life partner.
Right. Yep.
Does your life partner understand your business? I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't, right? Maybe they're an accountant and they're not, not a creative brain. So they're not going to understand that. Establishing that buy-sell agreement would allow for your partner to buy that out, have the portion of the business you own transition into their ownership, but your family be paid out on your evaluation of it. So it's the element of planning for legal documents, but also looking at like what if scenarios of, Mary Catherine, you mentioned this, like you become injured. Let's say you get in a car accident,
right,
and you mess up your hand. How can you do bouquets, floral arrangements, you name it, if you can't use your hand? It's the same as like a hairstylist, not being able to use your hand, those different types of things. Having disability insurance is something that's really important as well. It's not necessarily something I focus on in my practice because it is incredibly in depth that I bring in specialists into that space. But it's important to understand, like, if something happens, you could have that element of coverage, both short-term and long-term, for disability insurance. If you were to become injured and couldn't work for a period of time, you could have supplemental income from a policy. The other piece is just, what do you want your life to transition and look like for the people after you're not here? Newsflash, 2 things they guaranteed in life. Thank you, Benjamin Franklin: death and taxes. You won't be walking this face of the earth forever. I don't care if you think that, freezing bodies is going to be a thing. You're not going to be actively like living in a space for a period of time. So you need to plan for what you want that impact to be to the people you love afterwards. And, that looks like, in a will form, that looks like, what do you want to pass on financially? What do you want to pass on from an impact of what you've made in their life? What do you want that experience to be as well? So is that helpful?
Yeah, that is
legal documents, insurance, and making sure that you have a vision for what you want your impact to be.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of just brought something to mind too, of like, we've been talking about retirement, but I know that there are some people out there who like have a shop and they're getting ready to retire and they're thinking of selling. their shop to a young and new bright person, or to someone who's already worked with them for a while, what should they like kind of think about, as they're thinking about selling or transitioning that business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you got to think about it from a perspective of what financing options that person is going to have. How well do you know them? How well successful do you want them to be? Are they going to pay you in a lump sum? Are they going to pay you over a period of time? Maybe it's a combination of both, because you can set it up so that they could pay you over a period of time rather than one lump sum. That's probably a little bit more realistic for most folks, especially when it comes to business financing right now. It's really hard to be underwritten for a loan, especially just starting out. Most banks are just going to look at you like, haha, yeah, sure. Because they're too busy with the other aspects of PPP and need to know that whatever you're going to do is you're going to have solid financials behind it. And so you got to think about, are you selling the actual solid location? Are you selling any of the hard assets that you have? I'm sure, within that space, like, is there refrigeration? Is there whatever that you have to have inside that floral shop to make sure that everything is, whatever machinery you might have, whatever hard assets, those might be depreciated based on however you're filing taxes. So don't count on them to be in the evaluation of the business. So you've got to look at a lot of different things, both before and up until that sale. But from a planning perspective, if you haven't planned really well to sell your business, then having a lump sum payment and then a payment over time might help with that transition. But again, you want to sit down with somebody and have an individual conversation based on your personal scenario.
No, I think that's really great. And those are really great things to think about too, because people do have coolers. They might have leftover product, like vases and ribbon and all that jazz.
Yeah, and if you have a storefront too, you've probably got display items in there, shelving, buckets. And if you're doing weddings, you've probably got some rental pieces. So pedestals, arches, that kind of thing. There's a lot of different, sort of those hard assets that Shannon was talking about that you're probably going to have within that business that you kind of need to decide what to do with.
Well, and that's also your client list. We don't think about it really, but there are some towns where like they're the only florist around. So then when you step in, then like you get their client list. But again, that's kind of like in and of itself, kind of an item.
Well, and you can have a business evaluation done or valuation of your business done, and your client list will take a part of that. For any type of business that has that in it, that will look maybe not like a coaching business, but like a hard asset business, like an automotive, a floral, something that is producing something. You would be able to have that valuation done on your business to be able to sell it.
Yeah, but those intangible items too play a big role in that business, because you as the original owner have built that up. So it's your client list, it's your brand, it's from your brand, it's your website and your graphics and your logo and everything. It's referrals, it's the reputation. So there's a lot of those intangible items that are a huge component of your business, that there is monetary value to, even though you can't touch it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like sweat equity in a house, right?
Yeah. And you have to, just like you would take value in producing whatever it is that you're doing for a client, take value in your business. A lot of times when we're in our creative space, we don't want to live in that business part. And we're like, oh, it's okay. All right. Yeah, sure. Yep. That number's perfect. No, you need to really sit down and evaluate, what is all this that I've worked really hard for? What have I done? And know that some of it's going to get valued and some of it won't. And be ready for some of that, but don't just brush it off as it's not. Some of those things do actually have very real value to them. Well, and maybe they hire you on as a consultant part-time in that transition period. I've had clients who have sold their businesses, and what they do is they end up consulting part-time, basically whenever they want to, for this new person that's taking on their business, and they have the ability to almost like an apprentice type of role, train them into that space and collect income from the business. And that's just something that you would have to create in a contract. So again, really important to work with a business attorney. And there are some really great female owned business attorneys in the Twin Cities that are awesome.
Well, we just had on, last time we had Winnie on from the Creative Collective, and I know that she's pretty well known.
I was just going to say, Winnie is so awesome.
Her, like our networking team. Yeah. So it was really nice. And she is a really great resource to have too. But I think what really I love about this whole conversation, it really comes back down to our why. Like, what's your why? And like, how can you use your business as a tool to get to your why? And if that means that like you want to go to Bora Bora and you have to make like pictures of like you in Bora Bora, or like Bora Bora to remember, like when you have to tell a bride how much it is, and like that's the cold hard truth, then at least you like see Bora Bora and you're like, I'm going to Bora Bora, it's fine, like this bride will do it, right? But I mean, I think it's remembering those whys. And
I feel like Bora Bora would especially come in handy when we're trying to get through January, right?
Right.
Slow business and it's cold. Come on, I could look at Bora Bora.
Right, or if you want to have kids and you know that like you always know your Januaries are slow, and you maybe you get a second job until you have kids, and then now you have to adjust to that too, because I know that a lot of people do then jump into the restaurant industry and maybe do tables or waiting or any of that stuff. But I really have been enjoying how much we've been talking about the why throughout this whole conversation. So
Shannon, can you talk a little bit about like the most common pitfalls you see among business owners and maybe what they should avoid? Like, we've shared some really, really great advice. Let's tell people like what not to do. Like, don't do this, don't do that. Like what to stay away from, like at all costs.
Yeah. So I think it's like the opposite of everything that I told you to do, right? Like, don't ignore it. Don't ignore the conversation about money. You have had some sort of experience in your life and been taught things about money. Don't ignore those. Reteach yourself how those can now benefit you. Re-talk about that language with yourself. If money was a scarcity for you as a child, so now you hoard money, or if you don't believe you're worthy of it, all of those things you kind of work through. So don't ignore that part of things. Also, when you're looking at that squad or that team of professionals, they need to understand you. Don't just subscribe to somebody because they've got all of the credentials, all of the things. They have to know you. They have to be able to explain things to you in a way that you are able to understand. And there are people out there that do it. So don't like trust all of the flash. Really do your research and understand things out there. And don't get caught up in all of the flashy things to make your business grow. There are a lot of things out there that people tell you, like, spend this to grow your business, or I can grow your business to 6 figures, blah, 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 blah. You don't necessarily need to be a 6-figure business based on your lifestyle goals again. So don't fall into this element of, I have to be here because I see this. You need to figure out what it is you want from your lifestyle to get to that space. I did that in my own career. Like, what do I need to be able to live the space that I need to? And then anything above and beyond, that's how I grow my team. That's how I do all of the other aspects that I want to be able to do. So I think it's really just don't fall into all of the flash of everything else. I hear that from an aspect of business development, people you partner with, lifestyle expenses, right? Just because somebody's running their business that way doesn't mean that behind the scenes they're financially successful. Mm-hmm. So don't believe like everything that's on the outside before you actually like pull back the curtain, I guess. Maybe that's not like super practical, like here, you should set up this, right? But like, these are things that I think are more important than some of the other stuff too.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to Mary Catherine, you were talking about the why, like it's easy to get caught up in, oh, so-and-so has this, so-and-so has that, so-and-so's business is this. Well, it might look like that on the surface, like you said, Shannon, but you don't really know like the behind the scenes. And it's more important, I think, to focus on your business and what you want. It's good from a business person perspective to be aware of your competition, but you can't get too wrapped up in what they're doing. If you're successful, you will know it, and that's going to be what matters.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So don't judge it. Like, don't judge your success off of somebody else's success. When you establish your why, when you establish what's important to you, it won't matter. It might still come back to you and you're like, but this person, and then you have to reground yourself, right? Like, this is what's important to me. This is what I've established. So just stay in that space of knowing who you are and what you're doing and your why for your business. Then it'll make it easy for when you need to increase your prices and when you need to work with that difficult client. And also, like, there are a lot of clients out there that you don't necessarily have to work with, the ones that are difficult.
Right. Well, and you know, it's been really fascinating because throughout this whole series that we've been doing, that's really come up a lot of staying true to yourself. And if it's a difficult client and you just can't work with them, you move on. But I really have appreciated your time today, Shannon. So thank you so much. I'm going to link, we'll link the ways to get a hold of you, your different social medias so that people can check you out. Shannon also has an amazing podcast that I think you guys, it's free. So like, I know a lot of people are like, well, I can't afford X. You can afford to put it on while you're designing, like listen in the background, learn some cool things. She always has really interesting people on. They've got great perspectives and great ways of looking at life. So definitely check out her podcasts and go check out her website and her planning tools, because I think it's time to not keep our heads in the sand if we have been doing that. I can attest that I have sometimes been there, done that. But thank you so much, Shannon, for joining us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me. And if I can ever provide any additional content for you, I'd be happy to hang out.
Great. All right. Well, as always, guys, please like, comment, and subscribe. We know that we're doing a great job when at least you guys like hit that thumbs up button. I know it sometimes seems weird and difficult, but as we're on YouTube or Facebook, it lets us know that you guys like this content. Feel free to share it with all of your friends, even if they're not in the floral industry. I think this is applicable everywhere and to everyone. So even if you don't necessarily own a floral business or you're just an entrepreneur in a different aspect, this is a great resource. So check it out. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for taking the time to listen. And have a great day, guys.